In the Black Country, someone might say, alright, I've been your muck. That means, hello, how have you been, my friend? Back in the 90s as a teenager, me and my friends used to hang out underneath this railway bridge and light a campfire and drink and smoke until the early hours, and we'd often marvel at the incredible brickwork. And even though we didn't know anything about building really, we knew that nothing like this was being done in modern times. And well, these days, I look back at this bridge and I don't even think it was built by manual labour. I think it was more likely some sort of bricklaying 3D printer. As crazy as that sounds. And so today I'll be taking you on a short tour of about 2.5 miles along the Black Country Canal between Aldersley and Wolverhampton city centre. I'll be reading off some facts and some official history along the way and giving my own personal opinion. So I hope you enjoy. But before we leave, I would just like to point out that underneath these railway arches there has been a huge amount of earth and soil deposited here, and we used to be able to cross the railway tracks onto the other side of the canal, and those arches were completely blocked up with earth and soil. So I don't know if that was man-made or a natural occurrence of some sort, but very interesting nonetheless. As we approach this bridge, I'd like you to look over to the left-hand side on the other side of the canal and just notice that there are the classic blocked up brick archways that lead to apparently nowhere, which obviously doesn't make any sense. So the government have invested quite a lot in cleaning up these canals over the past few decades, and the water's actually very clean, and a lot of fish and ducks live down here. And as you can see, there are a few guys down there now litter picking. Thanks, lads. And now we're approaching our first lock. And for those of you who don't know what a lock is a small section of the canal which is blocked off by two gates. So a narrowboat will enter through one gate, then the gate will close behind it, and then the water will be drained out so that the narrowboat lowers, and then the other gate will be opened, and then the narrowboat can continue on its way. So unlike a river, a canal doesn't flow, so it requires these locks to go uphill or downhill. So here's a little bit of official history for you. Before 1700, canals were mainly used for transporting agricultural products in southern England, with landowners being the primary builders. The Romans built the Foss Dyke and Car Dyke in England and Wales, which connects Lincoln to the River Trent and Cambridge respectively. The canals primarily served the needs of agriculture, transporting goods from farms to markets. So There's nothing too crazy there. However, now we have a leap to the 1750s. During the Industrial Revolution era, there was something called canal mania. So the majority of the network was built in the golden age of canals between the 1770s and the 1830s. From the 1840s, the canals began to decline because the growing railway network was a more efficient means of transporting goods. From the beginning of the 20th century, the road network became progressively more important. Canals became uneconomic and were abandoned. So at that point, there were nearly 4,000 miles of canal, which is nearly twice the length of the Mississippi River. And it says that the vast majority of those canals were built within this 50 to 60 year period. But I would like to point out that in and around this time, Britain had some very expensive wars going on. So we have the American Revolution, which was between 1775 and 1783, the French Revolution, which was between 1789 and 1799, the 7 Years' War, which was between 1756 and 1763, which was a conflict between Britain and France with a significant colonial battles in North America, and the Napoleonic Wars, which was between 1803 and 1815. And of course, this is all on top of the hundreds of years of plagues and famines that ravaged Europe. Now, the academics and the historians are going to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, obviously, and there are logical reasons how all of this can be explained, even though it appears there is a bottomless pit of manpower, resources, and grit. How all of this infrastructure can get built, not by the government, but by private enterprises at a time of such low technology, low manpower, and economic hardship. Canals are typically 7 to 14 feet wide with varying depths.
Okay.
Some canals are deeper for larger boats. But if we do a rough calculation, assuming an average depth of 10 feet and a width of 10 feet, we're talking about 10 billion cubic yards done by men with shovels, horse and cart on mud roads. So the bottom and the walls of the canal are lined with either one of two things. One being brick and the other being puddle clay. It says that puddle clay is a waterproof barrier that was tamped down. So you can imagine how much clay or brick, either one, is equally impressive to line the sides and the bottom of 4,000 miles of canal. And you also have to think about the enormous trees and the enormous amount of foliage on either side of these canals. The root system, on the one hand, it helps maintain the banks in many places. You have like a sloping kind of embankment over the canal, which without the roots it would all collapse into it. But also these roots would like to find their way to that water, so it's very important that the roots don't burst through the walls of the canal themselves.
Morning.
If you ask Google how were UK canals built, it says the crew would begin by digging a channel to the specifications of the design. The sides were supported by wooden frames in the deeper sections to avoid the walls collapsing on the workers. The work could be very dangerous. Across the world, canal construction claimed many lives. So that answers that. So out of those 4,000 miles of canal that were originally built, only 2,000 miles are actually in use at the moment, so the other 2,000 are long gone and probably just dried out and overgrown. It says that approximately 5,000 boats with people living on them exist. I would probably guess that a large portion of those people are satanic paedophiles, but I have no evidence to back that up whatsoever. Now, whenever I'm looking at an old structure, whether it be a castle or a cathedral, any type of old world building, even a simple wall or pavement, I like to remind myself that I'm just looking at the bare bones of what it used to be, and at one point it could have been completely covered in gold or technologies that we don't even know about, that have long since been stripped away. So when we're looking at all this all this brickwork and block work, it's got a certain rustic charm to it now, but perhaps at the time that it was made, it was far more shiny and futuristic looking. I'm a believer that the millennial reign of Christ already happened, so it's interesting to me that they credit the Romans with building some of these canal systems around 120 AD. So I think nearly all of these canals, the over 4,000 miles worth of canals, were probably already here before the millennial reign, and then when Armageddon happened, a lot of it got covered over, and at some point, bit by bit, it got uncovered and cleaned out and put to use again. But it does seem to me that since the millennial reign, there has been at least one or two other events that involved rapid climate change. Just looking at the way that the old world buildings had been renovated to fit smaller people, and changes in street levels, and retrofitted with new roofs and guttering and plumbing systems and heating systems. So I don't think it's quite as simple as there was one destructive event that we call tribulation, and then it was simply 1,000 years of Christ's reign on earth, and then it got taken over in Satan's short season. But there was definitely, I think, at least one or two other resets, if you like, or cataclysms, or something. It's almost as if time stood still for a few hundred years, and there was no people or animals really, and no weather. As strange as that sounds, almost like the world just got frozen in time. And I think that would kind of explain that period of time between the end of 1700s and the start of the 1800s. One of the reasons why I think this is because of trees, actually. If any of you are familiar with tree planting, it's very difficult to stop animals from eating sapling trees. They're extremely nutritious for all kinds of animals, and easy pickings. Even if it's just one deer and an orchard full of young trees, can decimate that entire orchard in no time at all. So obviously we have a lot of trees, and you could say that some were planted by humans, and some were naturally kind of seeded by bird droppings or what have you. But I think it's either way, it's interesting that so many trees even got to grow. considering that none of them would have been fenced off like we have to do now if we want a tree to grow. If you're out in the countryside and you plant any kind of tree whatsoever, you have to fence it off with wire mesh and posts, so that not even a rabbit can get under, or a deer can jump over it. You know, a deer can clear 6 feet easy, and we kind of led to believe that the further back we go in the past, the less humans there were, but the more wildlife there would have been. So yeah, it's I don't see how all of these trees could even get to grow like they did and just wouldn't be eaten straight away. Also, if anyone's familiar with metal detecting, you'll know that, especially in the UK, most Roman coins are found in the top 6 to 8 inches of topsoil. Obviously on farmers' fields, the majority of them, because there's not many other places you're allowed to go and dig up. But those coins will have always been in the topsoil. You know, there wouldn't never have been any deeper than that, because obviously the same dirt just keeps getting turned over every year, really. And if you go down any deeper, you'll reach the clay. So I think the topsoil is burnt or charred organic matter for the most part from an extreme heat event. But the clay well, the clay comes in many colours, similar to a human skin. The colours seen in human skin, it's the same kind of spectrum. So you have, your white to your red and your black and everything in between. You never get green clay or blue clay. It's skin coloured, generally speaking. So I think it's possible that clay might be, humans that have, I don't know, melted or something like that. Because if you think about all those skeletons in the catacombs, Paris, talking about millions and millions of human skulls and femur bones that they say were bleached, boiled clean, and that's only the ones that we know about. I mean, there's probably the same thing underneath every city, just these millions of clean human bones. I'm just speculating as to where the skin actually went. Did it melt off or turn to clay or something? Because skin and clay are very similar. on a molecular level, minerally
Right, mate.
speaking.
Cheers.
That's why we have clay facial treatments and mud packs and things like this. It's very good for the skin. Are we just rubbing human remains onto our faces in the same way that we clean ourselves with soap, which can be rendered from fat also? We just recycling each other. In the UK, the largest landowner is something called the Forestry Commission. It owns approximately 2.2 million acres. Second to that is the Ministry of Defence with 850,000 acres. And thirdly is the National Trust, who own 800,000 acres. So the Forestry Commission is a non-ministerial government department responsible for the management of publicly owned forests and the regulation of both public and private forestry in England, formed in 1919 due to the severely depleted woodland because of the First World War. It's mostly accessible to the general public. And when you go in to one of these forests, within no time at all, you'll start finding anomalies, such as dry stone walls, which are something that are quite strange in the UK. People take them for granted because they're absolutely everywhere and they've always been here. And they're essentially about 18 inches thick wall, in varying height of about 4 feet to 8 feet. They're made from irregularly shaped natural rocks that are very closely and cleverly placed one on top of the other in such a way that creates a very solid wall. And these walls kind of divide private land up and keep livestock in the rightful place and stuff like this. But if you go into these forests, you'll find them going up hills of slopes of 30 degrees in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and there's no reason why anyone would ever go to that trouble. I've repaired a few of these walls, and just a small section can take days and days. I don't care how skilled you are at it, you have to carefully select just the right rock and place it perfectly, and just gathering these rocks in itself and transporting them through a forest and up a hill is a task in itself, let alone building the actual thing. Another thing you'll find in these forests are giant megalithic blocks in excess of 10 tons. I've seen ones that you get like a dozen or so just strewn about the forest floor like giant Lego, and there's no reason why they should be there, given that there's no cliff face, no mountain nearby that they could have fallen down from. And of course the official explanation will be something to do with some kind of Arctic drift or something from the Ice Age, stones that get transported in ice that melts, rocks are left in irregular places or something stupid like that. Anyway, I lived briefly with a guy who lived in a cabin in the woods in one of these forestry commissions, and the government didn't like him being there, but they really had no grounds to remove him, so they just left him there. but he had been handed down over generations and generations some oral history that within the forest, hundreds of years ago, there was a village that got completely covered in mud and is to this day still buried. And he'd even started digging a hole underneath his own property and found underneath um, his own cabin a giant rock underground. Actually saw it. It's quite interesting. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that they tell us that we're the most populated that we've ever been, but I think it's actually the opposite. I think we used to have way more people in the past than we do now. Anyways, we've reached the end of the line now, so I'll leave it there for today. But I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Ta-da a bit!